society. All sectors of our economy and the wider society, except for the hotel subsector, are back in business. I shall address this vital sector later on. What has happened so far? Our farmers and fishers are now gainfully employed. Our generous stimulus package has helped farmers and fishers to get back on their feet. Total fish landings for the second quarter of 2020, that is April to June, amounted to 144,460 pounds of fish valued at $1.7 million. This is up over the comparative period of 2019, when total fish landings were 144,320 pounds, valued then at $1.6 million. The fact that the second quarter result was better than that of the comparative quarter in 2019 is attributed to government's boosted support for the fisheries sector through our COVID-19 relief program. I'm advised by the Director of Marine Resources that 203 fishermen were assisted by the federal government, 123 of them in St. Kitts and 80 on the island of Nevis. Approximately $3 million were spent on fish trap wire, fishing line, hooks, rope, safety equipment, etc. A further $2.1 million have been spent on the agricultural sector, particularly for crops and livestock production. And the Director of Agriculture has advised that over 271 farmers have benefited. Our manufacturing plants are all operating again. As we speak, over 75% of all our manufacturing employees are back to work. Our retail and wholesale sectors have continued to do relatively well. All are opened. Our construction sector continues with the build-out of several public sector projects, such as the Island Main Road resurfacing project, the Old Road Bay Rehabilitation Project, Fisheries Project at Old Road, the Lodge Atlas Multipurpose Center. Residential construction continues, and the start of TDC Dewars Middle Income Project next month will add new impetus to the construction industry. Our first-time home owner program has picked up again after a steep drop in April. This year's applications have now exceeded last year's figures for the year to date. We expect our residential construction subsector to remain buoyant. The government $30 million mortgage financing program certainly is an important intervention. We have incentivized the CBI real estate market with a significant reduction in related stamp duty, now set at 2.5%. Private sector investment in residential and commercial properties is being encouraged. In order to further boost the expansion of jobs in the construction industry, our government is willing to sell lands at specially discounted prices to facilitate entrepreneurship in the development of residential and commercial properties. Property ownership is at the center of our efforts to create a stronger and safer future, with our people securing a piece of the rock, solidifying their stake in our beautiful country, and generating wealth in the land of their birth. For too long, our descendants were denied. Our generation deserves better, and we in government are committed to that stronger and safer future. Yes, our economy has been buffeted and battered by COVID-19. So too is the case all around the world. These are difficult times, but we are weathering the storm better than most. We continue to listen, review, and help our beloved citizens and residents where and when we can. All we have done with respect to our stimulus package in excess of $120 million, we have done without borrowing 1 cent. We are alone in this fiscal space, and we thank God for his blessings. Our savings, however, are limited, and the federal government has accordingly reprioritized its expenditures for 2020 to allow us to respond to COVID-19 and the huge threat it poses for the displaced, the unemployed, the poor, and the needy in our country. I turn now to the hotel sector reopening. Based on discussions with stakeholders in the tourism sector, it is expected that should things go as predicted, we shall be ready to open our borders by October 2020. An expansive training program is being spearheaded by the Ministry of Tourism in collaboration with the Ministries of Health and Civil Aviation. It aims to train over 5,000 persons in the industry at no cost to participants. I'm advised that this type of training carries a cost normally of about $100 per participant. But given the need to ensure all will benefit and can be certified by the Tourism Authority, the training is being offered free of cost. There is further good news. And the good news is that our major hotels are committed to St. Kitts and Nevis, and airlines are showing high interest in bringing their passengers to our shores. Marriott is still committed to St. Kitts and Nevis. A new general manager has arrived on island recently, and I gather that she will be the one to guide the operations forward. COI has advised that it has been in touch with Hilton, and it will reopen in the last quarter of 2020. Park Hyatt is expected to open fully in October 2020, providing work to its 180 employees. I am pleased, however, to learn that its Fisherman's Village restaurant is already open for business. The Royal St. Kitts Hotel is functioning, albeit in a reduced capacity. Tomorrow, the Minister of Labor and I will meet with the management of Four Seasons, and we will report on this on a later date. Generally, confidence in the business community remains good. This is due largely to our excellent management of the economy prior to COVID-19, which saved lives and kept our citizens and residents safe. Foreign investors are showing high interest in doing business here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And of course, as a responsible government, we are encouraging them to do so. For the year so far, January to July, the number of business licenses reached its highest level of 463 approvals, compared to 414 over the comparative period in 2019 processed to the Ministry of Finance. This achievement is commendable given the dramatic fall in applications for businesses experienced in April 2020, directly attributable to the uncertainty and unpredictability brought on by COVID-19. July has been our best month so far, with 101 approvals granted. We commend the entrepreneurial spirit of our people as they utilize the opportunities for new forms of income generation in the face of COVID-19. We see entities diversify into mass making and producing hand sanitizers right here in our islands. We saw innovation in entertainment at the lawns of Frigate Bay, with drive-in movie now available on weekends. We commend the creativity and ingenuity of our people. We encourage those displaced as a result of COVID-19 to think through how they can apply their skills and talents to the new opportunities for self-employment and alternative employment. New providers of PCR testing are likely to emerge. This is important. As we open our borders, there will be increasing demand for COVID-19 tests. The delivery of quality lab services will help the efficiency and effectiveness of our response for tests as more visitors enter our beautiful country. In order for our country and people to benefit from the talents, experience, and skills of some of our most effective former ministers, my government has engaged the services of Messrs. Vance Amery and Ian Liebert. We have also engaged Kevin Williams. Mr. Williams is an experienced engineer and former captain in the St. Kitts and Nevis Defence Force, with training in wide areas of interest to national security, project conception, and management. They will all be designated ambassadors and will provide support to the government as a whole and to the office of the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister on a range of matters relating to regional and international affairs, the CBI, special projects, public sector reform, rural and sustainable development, public infrastructure, utilities, alternative energy, and public policy issues. I must also advise the public of certain changes in the assignments of permanent secretaries since the swearing-in of the new administration. The permanent secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, Marine Resources et al. Is Mr. Ron Collins. The permanent secretary acting in the Ministry of Public Infrastructure et al. Is Mr. Daryl Lloyd. The permanent secretary in the Ministry of International Trade, Industry, Commerce and Labor is Ms. Jasmine Weeks. The permanent secretary in the Ministry of Environment and Cooperatives is Ms. Sharon Ratan. And the permanent secretary acting in the Ministry of Human Settlement et al. Is Mrs. Brenda Boncampo. I turn now to the Parliament. The second sitting of this new session of Parliament will take place on the 13th August 2020 at our Parliament chambers at Government Headquarters. So we have moved from the luxury of the Marriott Hotel. Some adjustments to the spatial layout have been directed by the Honourable Speaker. This will result in a smaller gallery being available as we observe social distancing. Visitors to Parliament must wear their masks. The Honourable Speaker has been asked to coordinate efforts for the building of a home for Parliament outside of Government Headquarters. Several important pieces of legislation have been agreed by the Cabinet for presentation to the Parliament. Two of the bills will address our international obligations under the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, CFATF. Specifically, these two bills will aim to prevent and suppress the financing of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and to make minor amendments to a number of laws, including amendments to several acts, such as the Customs Act, Police Act, mutual legal assistance in criminal matters, etc. The bill to limit the tenure of the office of the Prime Minister will be presented for a first reading, and the National Assembly Elections Amendment Bill will provide for the length of stay that would qualify various persons to be able to vote in our federation. I wish to record again my condolences to the family, friends, and well-wishers of Mr. Richard Keynes, a former Minister of Finance. Mr. Keynes will be accorded an official funeral, and in that regard, his family is working with our Cabinet Secretary with regard to fulfilling that particular mandate. Police Officer Wayne McCoo served his country for close to 25 years. He died in Trinidad, and his body was recently flown back home. I would want to join the Police High Command in extending condolences to his wife and the rest of the family, and certainly the Ministry of National Security hold them up in their loss and bereavement at this particular moment in time. Finally, a note of congratulations I must extend to my colleague, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, on the PNM's victory in the general elections of August 10th in Trinidad and Tobago. I look forward to Trinidad and Tobago's continuing progress under his leadership and the harmonious cooperation at our bilateral level, and certainly beyond the bilateral, within the context of CARICOM and further afield. I want at this point now to pause for any questions from the media.
Glenn Bart from the SKN Newsline. I have basically four matters. The first is, can you indicate how much revenue the government has lost as a result of the COVID-19 environment? Secondly, how much has been spent so far on the $1,000 relief package, and how much has been spent on the overall stimulus program to date? We are hearing of financial difficulties being experienced at the ANC Ports Authority as a result of the COVID-19. Can you talk about the actual situation that's taking place there? And lastly, we're also hearing about the change of the Social Security Board membership, and can you comment on that as well? Thank you.
We will take a few questions and then we will have the answers. Is there anyone else from the media who would like to engage us at this time?
Calabar, ZZ Broadcasting Corporation. The Center for Disease Control has placed the country at a level 3 and has advised U.S. citizens not to travel to St. Kitts. What is the government's response to this warning? And also, there are exemptions that have been put in place for persons with underlying conditions. How are the authorities able to verify this?
Good morning. Kevin Brown from WinFM. I have a couple questions. What is the status of the severance fund? Is it in a position to meet the demands that has been placed on it?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
What is the status of the severance fund? And is it in a position to meet the demands placed on it? Also, what is the status of the payments to workers in those tourism sectors, for example, the Marriott and other hotels that have made their staff redundant? What is the status of the payment of their severance funds at the moment? And lastly, what financial safeguards have been prepared for the possible consequences of the reported active hurricane season?
Alicia Daniel Blake, Sugar City, 90.3 FM. The broadcaster of Sugar City FM is unable to be here in person. So I'm going to see if technology will allow me to let his question be aired.
Good morning, Mr. Prime Minister. Val Thomas from Sugar City FM. I'm asking this question on behalf of Sugar City FM from the Jane France Hospital. When are we going to see an improvement for the staff here at Jane France Hospital, assistance to assist them in the workplace? They need more staff to assist them get the work done properly. When are we going to see some improvement for the hospital itself as soon as possible? And as you know, it's been 25 years. We don't want to go into another 5 years or another 2 years waiting for this to be done. I think right now at this moment, the hospital should be first preference. A healthy nation, you can't get a better thing than a healthy nation. Becomes a wealthy nation. And the staff here at Jane France, they need help immediately. So the question goes to you or the Minister of Health. Thank you.
And my question goes to Minister Evelyn. We know that the Ministry of Environment and environment in general gets quite a bit of attention. So my question is specific to your other federal part of your portfolio, which is cooperatives. Now, you visited the agro strip on Friday, June 26th, and we would like to generally get an update as to what other activities you have undertaken with respect to cooperatives, and also to get an idea of what are your plans going forward. Thank you.
Okay, we will have some answers to the question posed. We will have Eric, Evelyn, the Honorable Minister, respond to those that have been directed to him by Ms. Daniel. We will have responses from, I think, the Honorable Lindsey Grant. We will have responses from the Honorable Eugene Hamilton, and we will have responses from the Honorable Wendy Phipps in relation to those matters which directly fall under their portfolio. With respect to the loss of revenue due to the COVID-19 pandemic, that of course is a figure that changes each day. What I can say, without giving now, don't have at the tip of my tongue, the exact number, is that there has been a substantial fall-off in revenue collection, both at the level of the Inland Revenue Department and at the Customs and Excise Department. These, of course, are the two principal revenue collecting agencies of the government, and one could get a general sense of how the government is doing from those collections, which are the two most significant ones. I would say that we have also, that is the government, through the intervention of the stimulus package, created a situation of reduced income to the extent that we offered waivers, for example, with respect to water for some 6 months, to the extent that we place a moratorium on the payment and reduction on the payment of corporation tax for the relevant period. We have reduced the payment or the amount payable from 33% to 25%. We have also reduced the quantum to be payable with respect to unincorporated business by a significant 50%, from 4% to 2%. And all of these initiatives, when taken together, would impact, of course, the availability of resources to operate the government. Additionally, we continue to maintain a level of expenditure, some of it abnormal in the context that they could not have been reasonably foreseen. So we have spent perhaps now well over $15 million extra on the health sector to ensure that it was put in a resilient way to deal with the expected worst-case scenarios related to the pandemic. We shall try by our next press conference or before to give the dollar value, but we have lost in the region of 30 to 40% of all revenues as a result of the pandemic. And you could also conceptualize other areas where naturally we'd have lost revenue. You could think, for example, that with the closure of the borders, then there is no departure taxes, there is no hotel taxes to be collected, because those operations literally have come to a standstill. And so we still continue to be prudent in our management of the economy and the financial resources of the country. And in that regard, I have spoken in my initial statement to the reprioritizing of the expenditure, because we can't continue the expenditure at the same magnitude. Indeed, we have $120 million in a stimulus package, which was largely unbudgeted, well, unforeseen. So when you add that, we have had to reprioritize some of the expenditures to ensure that we do not overwhelm our own ability to function in the near future. And we have taken the prudent decision at this time that we will utilize savings rather than to engage in debt, accumulation of debt, as almost all countries within the OECS have been forced to do to treat with the pandemic. So that is where, as far as the revenue loss is concerned, the total amount with respect to the stimulus package, we had presented, I think, that at the last press conference, the figures would have to be revised. Since that time, for example, we have given a further extension of 3 months with respect to the waiver and water bills. We extended for another 3 months the amounts with respect to the corporation tax reduction and the reduction in the tax paid by unincorporated businesses. At some point, certainly by the end of September, we would want to have a more comprehensive look and do the mathematics of the consequences of the stimulus package. Some areas certainly are going to be much greater than what we had anticipated. The health sector, of course, continued to be at the fulcrum of all activity with respect to the fight against COVID-19. And so the expenditures there are substantial. We also would have to look at the net results of our expenditure, and we would be able to give a better analysis of how the stimulus basically has impacted upon the economy. The matter to do with the advisory that Carla Berridge raised, the level 3, certainly my understanding of it is that it is not an advice not to travel. Level 4 is an advice not to travel to a particular destination. Level 3 is a precaution that the government is asking its citizens to exercise. My own view is that it is ill-advised in terms of its own designation of St. Kitts and Nevis in Category 3. And I have communicated that to the U.S. Ambassador in Barbados, and we certainly expect to see some correction of the designation of St. Kitts and Nevis in Level 3. We have done so well, and from the report, given our R number of 0.3, we are really one of the countries that have best managed the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm certain that there is quite a lot that St. Kitts and Nevis can teach the United States of America and several other countries about how you manage the pandemic. And so sometimes we look at who is talking and we wonder at the legitimacy of their particular positions. So we will continue to be a responsible member of the international community to provide the outstanding leadership that we have provided with respect to COVID-19. Indeed, at a particular point of vulnerability, when the US government could not get enough ventilators, it is to St. Kitts and Nevis that the White House looked and made several interventions for us to get the Harrisova plant in Sandy Point up and running so that it could provide them with the necessary inputs which will get the ventilators into production. So our standing is a good one. And so sometimes when we see misinformation within the media, we have to be careful and to remind our people of what the facts are. I would see if there are any other issue more directly related to me. Say if I would want to, the matter of the hurricane season is one which is not lost on us, and our mitigation council is ever present and ever active. When, for example, I think it may have been 2 weeks ago, certainly of recent vintage, we had the storm passing. It was the activation of the various committees that provided the advice that we are to close the country the following day, and we did so. And we see it was the right call in terms of what had happened, the displacement, etc., in the country. So we continue to be on high alert at this particular time, and fully aware of the pressures which the hurricane season can bring. One general statement in relation to the reference to the Social Security Board. I would want to make the point that there is nothing unusual in board changes from time to time. And indeed, those changes can be very beneficial. It is never the intention of the government that board membership would last for a lifetime. And so, generally, from time to time, it becomes necessary to recruit fresh talent, a fresh pair of eyes, new set of skills, having regard to where an entity is. So that is a general observation, not dealing with any specific situation which would guide board changes at this particular moment in time. I want, however, to take the opportunity to commend all who have been in service in a variety of boards over the last 5 years, and to say how grateful we were and are that they had accepted the opportunity to serve and to pool their talent with others to advance the respective entity. I would want now to invite Senator Phipps to deal with the matter of the severance fund. Then we will hear from the Honorable Lindsey Grant. We will have Mr. Hamilton. We will have Mr. Evelyn, and we'll have Mrs. Byron Nisbet on the matter of health.
Good morning, everyone. I would just like to recap the questions that were being posed to the Ministry of Labor from WIN-FM, Mr. Kevin Brown. As I understood it, the questions were as follows. What is the status of the severance payment fund? Is the fund in a position to meet the demands currently being placed on it in the present COVID-19 environment? And what is the status of the payment of severance to hotel workers. I assume those were the questions and also in the order in which they were asked. Now, the first question, the status of the Severance Payment Fund. To answer your question, I will go into a little bit of history on the Severance Payment Fund, so please bear with me. The Severance Payment Fund would have been started in the mid-1980s as a result of a situation that had developed here in St. Kitts and Nevis, whereby the manufacturing sector, the light electronic type manufacturing sector, would have just begun to burgeon after a situation whereby only Electrofab would have been operating prior as an electronic assembly plant. That plant was eventually sold, and it is now operating today as what we refer to as API, Harris Server Controls. However, the decision to start the fund was a means of getting around this system of absconding by certain manufacturing entities who would close their doors on workers and left them without anything, single-handed, and would take off. Examples include Wellington, Medusa, and so forth. And those of us who are old enough will remember those stories. The Severance Payment Fund is a 1% deduction from the overall payroll of an employer paid to Social Security on a monthly basis. Again, it is only paid by the employer. The employed person has never ever made a contribution to the Severance Payment Fund. Over the years, the Severance Payment Fund would have had demands made on it in the event of hurricanes, business closures, business restructuring, and so forth. And all of these conditions to apply for severance are clearly articulated in the 1986 Protection of Employment Act. Traditionally, over the years, the fund has always been in a negative position because of demands that have been made upon it. The current model of the fund, we are now realizing, especially during this COVID-19 environment, is an unsustainable model. Because what it means going forward is that for it to be sustainable, and if pandemics or epidemics or other exogenous shocks, such as severe hurricanes, will continue to affect us as predicted by the experts, then it then means that we either have to change the contribution model, whereby we would now have to accept or demand the contributions from the employed persons, or go the other way around it, and which is to engage in discussions with Social Security, some of which have started in recent years, as to the possibility of starting what, for the want of a better term, can be considered an unemployment insurance fund managed by Social Security. And under that model, what would obtain then would be a situation just like the Social Services Levy, where we would have maybe matching funds from either the employer and the employed person, or a tiered system where one might pay slightly higher than the other. A model like that might be more sustainable because there would be more financial controls in a system like that, and the structure of Social Security would allow you to have more of an option for investment of the funds that are not being used during the medium to long term. So to answer your question, the fund is in a state of arrears at this moment, and that state had been so before the COVID-19 pandemic. Can the fund meet the demands that are presently being placed on it? By simple mathematics, the answer would be no. Having said that, what normally obtains is that when there are justifiable demands on the funds and on the fund, and it is in a negative state, the government still has to find ways and means to capitalize the fund from other revenue heads for the country. Having said that, what I mean to indicate is that all claims that are being made on the fund that are justified, that are verified, will be honored by the government. The status of payments of Severance Payment Fund, that's the last question, to hotel workers. Those payments have not commenced. While I'm on the subject, I should indicate for general information that of the just over 600 employees of the Marriott, there would have been just about maybe 560 or thereabout who would have been laid off because the hotel plant would have retained the services of approximately 89 workers, so those were never laid off. However, based on the data I would have received from the Labor Department up to this morning, out of the 500 plus employees of the Marriott, only 309 of them have approached the department to claim severance. By extension, just in case this was a follow-on question, there were a number of individuals who would have contemplated applying for the long service gratuity, which came about several years ago, and the main beneficiaries being manufacturing and hotel sector workers. As of this morning, there were 21 claims for the long service gratuity. I trust that this answers the questions.
Thanks. We will now have Minister Grant to respond.
Good morning to all. I think the question that was posed to me was that the understanding is that there are financial difficulties at the Air and Seaports Authority, and what are we intending to do about those difficulties? I would first wish to say that, as the Prime Minister had said earlier, we have a new board at the St. Kitts Air and Seaports Authority. And obviously, as he said, new eyes and new management. And we'll take a different look at things. What I can say is that the business model of the Air and Seaports is predicated on the borders being open. And as you are quite aware, at present the borders are closed. And so therefore there is a significant impact on the revenue base of the Air and Seaports Authority. I should also say at this juncture that about 80% of the operating costs of the authority are fixed costs, 20% thereabout being discretionary costs. I would also wish to say that at the Air and Seaports Authority, there are four main revenue drivers. Basically, the seaport, that's cargo, the seaports passengers, the airport passengers, and the airport cargo. Those are the four economic drivers and revenue drivers at the Air and Seaports Authority. As it stands to date, year over year, our cargo imports per tonnage is down 53%. Our cargo exports per tonnage is down 79%. In terms of seaport passengers, cruise vessel calls down 100%. Cruise passengers down 100%. Yacht vessel calls down 100%. Yacht passengers down 100%. When we look at air passengers at the airport, flights in down 82%, flights out down 82%, passengers in down 100%, passengers out down 99%. When we look at the airport in terms of cargo, cargo in down 44%, cargo out down 18%. And so you would recognize that there is a great variance in terms of our economic and revenue drivers. And hence, the revenue base of the authority is impacted. I can also indicate to you that between 2018 and 2020, we at the Air and Seaports Authority embarked upon a capital assets rehabilitation program, which was a significant capital expenditure by the authority. And obviously those capital expenditures were made with the expectation that we would not have COVID. And so that too has impacted upon the authority. For example, over the period 2018 to 2020, we would have had a capital rehabilitation program which included some $193 million. Obviously, you will recognize also that would have included the second cruise pier. We also had to do some work on runway taxi BNC, the runway lighting for the airport, taxiway A and the drainage. The elevators at the airport were rehabilitated, the carousel, the conveyor system, the Alpha Apron connection, which is in progress, the ferry terminal building, and the West Bus Terminal. So all those have been capital expenditures by the authority, and such would have impacted because basically the revenue is significantly down. However, as the Prime Minister had said earlier today in his address, that we are hopeful that if the status quo remains and we are not further impacted by the COVID-19, we are looking to, in some measured way, open the borders, which hopefully will bring some revenue back to the Air and Seaports Authority. I would, however, stress that we also have done in our own approach to make sure that the Air and Seaports Authority stays above water. We have had some management cuts. Management has agreed at the Air and Seaports Authority to take a 10% cut initially. We have cut some of the perks awarded to the employees, all in an effort to ensure that at this very difficult stage, in not only the Air and Seaports time, but in the country's time, that we manage our very, very scarce resources in a very meaningful and significant way. And so we know that we are in difficult times, but as we have said all along, this is an all-society approach, and we will, in this fluid situation, ensure that the country maintains its good economic standing now and in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bart, for the question. I intended to stay at the table and answer, seeing that there's a mic there, but I'm following in my colleague's footsteps who came to the podium. I think the Prime Minister has answered your question quite well and has given you the background. In fact, that shows that the Cabinet is fully aware of what we are doing in terms of our boards, especially that at Social Security. And so I want to begin by commending those who have served in the last 5 years under the Team Unity administration. They have done a fabulous job serving the institution, and some certainly have served not because of any revenue, income, or anything that they're getting, but because they're contributing to the state, to the national service, to serving their country, and I want to commend them for that. We have looked at the Social Security in the last 2 months, and I've proposed to the Cabinet that we need to have an additional focus. We need to have additional focus on the performance of some of our assets. As a result of that, additional skill sets were required at the level of the board, and so some changes have been made. In fact, there are quite a few members of the board who served in the last 5 years who will continue to serve, but a new focus on the institution requires some additional skill sets. And having made that recommendation to the board, to the Cabinet, they have agreed with my proposal, and so those changes have been made. So the short answer to your question is that there's a board fully in place to continue the program of the government as seen through the Social Security Board. And we will expect in the next 5 years, first 3 years for the term that they offered and the additional years, that we will see the focus, the new focus of Social Security bearing fruit for the people of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank the young lady for the question. And you're totally correct. I did attend the Agro Strip a couple of Fridays ago. And as the new Minister of Cooperatives, when I heard about the initiative, I decided, well, I had to jump right in and visit that strip. I must say as well that I was quite impressed with what I saw in terms of the quality from the farmers as well as the agro-processors. I would have had some discussions there on the spot with the members of the cooperatives there. Apart from that, I would have also had some discussions with the president of the Agro-Processors Cooperative on St. Kitts. I would have also met and had in-depth discussions with the Director of Cooperatives, Mr. Clyde Thompson, as well as the Permanent Secretary in my ministry, Ms. Sharon Rattan. And apart from that as well, this past Monday, last week Monday actually, there was a session at the Department of Cooperatives with Mr. Gene Knight, who has actually been working with on developing a strategic plan, a new 5-year strategic plan for the movement of the cooperative sector on the island of St. Kitts. I must say that in terms of my vision for the cooperative sector, I think there's a lot that can be done. There's a lot of potential and scope for the cooperatives on St. Kitts. I was so impressed with what I saw in terms of the quality of the produce on the agro strip that I believe with the resurgence that we're seeing in the agriculture sector here in St. Kitts and in Nevis as well, of course, we must have the cooperative sector being developed alongside the agricultural sector. I intend to have a lot of collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture and the cooperatives here in St. Kitts. They have a lot in terms of what they need to be done. There have been some challenges that they have said to me, very legitimate challenges, and I believe that I would be looking towards the support of my cabinet colleagues in moving the cooperative sector forward. There's a lot that can be done in terms of here in St. Kitts and Nevis as well, and I think there's a lot of scope and potential for export as well to our neighboring islands and further afield. And so I would be looking for the support of my cabinet colleagues in moving the cooperative sector forward. There's a lot that can be done in terms of agriculture, fisheries, agro-processing, and beekeeping. And because of the fact that I've worked with cooperatives in the past, I know that the cooperatives, they have some concerns, and we must be able to work with them to get over those concerns, to get over those humps, and to move the sector forward. The cooperative spirit is somewhat lacking in some of the sectors in terms of fisheries and beekeeping and so on, and we must get it back because there's a lot that can be done by the cooperatives themselves rather than just sitting back and waiting for the government or the departments to do everything. The cooperatives themselves can do a lot. And there's a lot of funding out there as well. And the funding can only be gotten once people band themselves in the cooperatives. So I will be creating that push from the ministerial level, and I'm hoping to get the support from the farmers, the agro-processors, the fishers, and the beekeepers as we move the sector forward. Thank you.
Good morning, thank you, PM. The questions that were posed to me was when will we see an improvement of staff at JNF, the need for more staff at JNF, and when will we see improvements at the hospital? To answer that question, I would just like to say that currently I'm in the process of conducting what I term as a listening tour. I've already had meetings with the management within the Ministry of Health, and now I'm taking this listening tour down to the staff level. And so I'm meeting with the groupings, be it environmental health officers, which were the first grouping, the nurse managers within community, the nursing staff within JNF, as well as the clerical staff, the cleaners, and whoever else is involved within the ministry. The idea is to be able to hear from them, what are your concerns, but not only what are your concerns, but most importantly as well, what are your ideas on how what you do can be improved, how you can improve it, and then let us work together to see this come to fruition. One of the things that we are working on as well is the implementation of the health information system, as we believe that this would significantly improve the service offerings at JNF, but not only at JNF, but the intention is that the health information system will also be able to expand out to the community as well. So we have a team that have been put together within the ministry. It's a collaboration between the Ministry of Health and the Department of Technology. And this team will be training the staff on the use of the health information system. one of the great advantages of the health information system is that it allows the medical records of every citizen to be all in one place. And so even if you say you have a service done at Joseph and France Hospital and you need to have follow-ups done within the community, the idea is that in the future, once your record is at Joseph and France and you move to community, by the use of your medical ID provided to you on booking at the hospital, the community health will be able to determine what you were there for, what's the position of your health, etc., to make it much easier for us to be able to know and provide that service to the general public. This was something that would have been introduced during the last 5 years. But however, it has not been implemented, and so we want to be able to work towards getting that in wider use, because one of the projects that we have coming up next year is to connect all of the health centers back to JNF so that this information can be shared between both the JNF and the community health centers. And so that would be very important for us to make sure that that health information system is implemented and being used within JNF and further afield within all of the health centers and the other institutions such as Mary Charles and Parkson as well, with the intention of being able to have this same thing implemented over at the Alexandria Hospital in Nevis as well. But what's most important to us at the Ministry of Health right now is a focus on community health and primary care. And so over the next year, the next budget year, you will see more emphasis being placed on primary health care, because we want JNF, Mary Charles, Parkson, Alexandria to be a facility you use for emergency. And what we're seeing is more and more persons coming into these facilities with non-communicable diseases that they can control at home, or if they have the knowledge and the know-how how to be able to treat them, if they even access the services of the health centers within their local community, they will not have that need to come to JNF. And in order for us to remove the strain on JNF with some of these repeat patients, because of these non-communicable diseases, more effort will be placed on getting persons to realize the importance of the primary care sector through our health centers and the use of our district medical officers. I see one of our district medical officers here in the person of our deputy speaker, and I'm sure she will agree that more attention will need to be placed within the community health sector as well. And so those are some of the ways in which we are trying to improve the services of the Ministry of Health as a whole, and more specifically to JNF. Once this listening tour is completed, I'll have a better idea of where we are in terms of what the staff needs are, or how we can improve the services there. And then throughout next year, more will be rolled out. But I am almost positive that once we can implement that health information system, it would help a great deal. In terms of the improvements at the hospital itself, I know much have been said about the building of the new hospital, which the Prime Minister have already committed to and for which we are very grateful. And I know that the area has already been identified in West Bastia as well. And so we're looking forward to that. But we do understand that that will take time. And in the meantime, there is still some areas within JNF that need some improvement done. So over the next year, we will be looking at moving the Cabinet and Finance to support the continued build-out of some areas within JNF. For instance, where the laundry, the kitchen staff is located, they need particular attention, because until the new hospital is built, they still need to be able to work in an environment that is safe and healthy for them as well. And so those improvements will be looked at in 2021. And I hope that would have answered the question.
Thank you. I think there was a question posed with respect to the certifying of persons with special health conditions. And the perhaps best way we can do that would be if these persons would have a letter or some other information is provided by their doctors to indicate with respect to the mask that it would not be advisable for them to be wearing that. So that question, I am advised, had come, and so just off the top, one could suggest that where persons have particular challenges of a health nature, which makes it not wise for them to be wearing the mask. They should at least have some evidence of that particular matter. I just want to also wish Valentine Thomas a speedy recovery, and we are happy that the environment is sufficiently comfortable so that he could call today and even put forward the concerns of others. We are big on systems, and we will always ensure, within the context of the government, ministries and departments, there is always a mechanism by which persons can hear concerns and grievances and to have them addressed. And we have been doing that. And apart from the work of the new minister, even before then, we had the new matron at the hospital doing her own listening tours and making recommendations. As a result of, for example, previous consultations with the nurses and their reps, the government this year substantially increased the amounts that were paid as wages and salaries for those in that profession. And we have also targeted the EMS workers, those who provide that service, for adjustment in their salaries. So in time, all the issues will be addressed, and we prefer to be able to address comprehensively the concerns rather than continue to pick at A, B, C, to have them all outlined and to determine how we will prioritize. The health sector will have a legacy coming after this COVID-19 pandemic, where it will be at the strongest place it ever was in terms of its ability to deliver suitable care to every citizen and resident. The investment which we make now in response to COVID-19 will endure long after. The provision of the ventilators, the provision of different services and support systems, the reorganization of healthcare delivery, all these will be part of the legacy benefits. We have invested, for example, significantly in augmenting the number of ambulances which will be available to the health sector, in part in order to ensure rapid response to the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly if a worst-case scenario was to emerge. But even thereafter, it means that we could more strategically relocate or assign our ambulance to be of quicker and better support throughout St. Kitts and Nevis. So I am very pleased by the successes we have had in the health sector. And the next 5 years, we will make our health services in St. Kitts and Nevis the model in the entire region. Even as we speak now, in response to the COVID-19, we have one of our very experienced doctors, son of the soil abroad, who is involved in heart treatment and the provision of care, working diligently to ensure that such a facility becomes readily available in St. Kitts and Nevis, and it will be a center of excellence. So we are going to be improving the range and quality of services that are available for those who need them in St. Kitts and Nevis. And we will also look at the physical infrastructure. And the minister spoke to the commitment in our manifesto to build a brand new JNF hospital in West Barstow. That is something, the details of which are being fleshed out. But we are aware of some of the physical and other limits with respect to the JNF hospital. Even as we discuss in our meetings our response to COVID-19, we had to confront the limitations with respect to the physical layout, what can be done and cannot be done, can you go up another floor? All those issues had to be confronted as the CMO and the medical chief of staff and the permanent secretaries address what flexibility we could have in our response in terms of the reorganization of the existing facilities there. So I have a very optimistic view about our ability to deliver a substantially improved health care to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And this, of course, one will see the benefits of and experience those improvements in the not-too-distant future. We have had a track record of delivery in healthcare, both at the level of the mental health care services, by the addition of an important facility at Limekiln, the daycare, what do we call it again, Minister? Mental health daycare treatment, which is a new addition that we brought, the provision of the oncology wing at the hospital to provide support to those who are impacted by cancers, the addition of the hemodialysis support services at the JNF. All these are things that we have done over the last term. We delivered a brand new Mary Charles Hospital in Molyneux to deal with the fact that the one that was there had become dilapidated and was no longer fit for purpose. Based on that track record, you can be assured of our commitment to healthcare and to its improvement in the near future. With respect to the severance fund, I want to make it clear that the government will ensure that any qualified person who has become entitled to benefits will receive those benefits. The minister was quite correct when she pointed to the severance fund and the inherent limitations which now exist. There is a fundamental problem with the business model as it relates to the severance fund. And in moving forward, what we have said we will do, we will get the actuary to do the appropriate investigation and to advise the government properly. How do we need to capitalize the fund to ensure it can meet the commitments as they fall due? Just before the 2015 general elections, the last government introduced by law the long service gratuity obligation and imposed that on an already overburdened severance fund. What that meant was that two very distinct obligations, the obligations to provide severance payment and the obligation to satisfy long service workers in specific entities, tourism, manufacturing, that the fund now had two major obligations and one source of income that was already stretched. The government was highly irresponsible then to add knowingly to the burden of a fund that was hemorrhaging another obligation without providing support. It is our lot as a government with vision and a government that is concerned about prudent fiscal management to ensure we make the correction. And we have reached out to the actuary attached to the Social Security Fund, or who had performed a series of work for Social Security to assist us in addressing this dilemma going forward, so that we could create, really, that safer future for all workers in St. Kitts and Nevis. But beyond that, we are also looking, and this is an important point that the minister spoke to, which needs to be re-emphasized, the creation of a new benefit from the Social Security Fund called the unemployment benefit, so that when people become unemployed, then they are available to access support from the Social Security. We have also asked that the actuary would also look at what the creation of such a benefit will do to the resources required for the sustainability of the severance fund. Which one would you call on, in which circumstances, and how these things are to be funded? These are critical elements which our government now, in this second term, will be addressing frontally, and have we already put things in operation for us to get the right answers with respect to these problems which we have inherited. Equally, the pandemic has brought to the fore the question of some limitations of the Protection of Employment Act. Could one have reasonably envisage that you will reach a state where every hotel in the country become closed, and closed not just for a short period, but for a prolonged period running on 2 months? And the answer is that the law never contemplated that. And so we now need to use that experience to bring a legislative response apart to the financial response that now has to come to the operation of the Protection of Employment Act to protect all. And we have mandated that the Minister of Labor will engage the members or the other entities that are part of the tripartite arrangement involving employers, involving labor union, and of course the government, as we find solutions for the workplace. I gather that that meeting will take place tomorrow afternoon. So you see, we are working diligently and in an organized way to address the problems that we have inherited, and some of them have emerged quite unexpectedly, but we are never shirking from our responsibilities to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Is there any further question at this time? If not, we will say thank you.
Good day, I'm LaShawn Dixon, St. Kitts Nevis Observer. 3 quick questions. What are the plans the government is doing to regularize vendors, since it appears that many are popping up on the sidewalks and the side of the roads? Also, can we get an update on the construction activity that was geared to stimulate economic activity? And also, how has the response been with the incentivized CBI programs?
Alicia Daniel Blake, Sugar City, 90.3 FM. This question is for Minister Baron Nisbet. Minister, you have some completely new ministries in your portfolio: entertainment, entrepreneurship, and talent development. Can you update us as to how the build out of these new ministries are going? And the following question, I'm not sure who would like to answer it. Will the COVID-19 app be activated at the same time as the opening of the hotel industry?
Could you repeat that last one, Mrs. Daniel?
Sure. Will the COVID-19 app on our phones be activated at the same time as the opening of the hotel industry?
Thank you very much. With respect to the regularization of the vendors, this is a matter that we are going to address this year in a carefully managed way. We certainly are all concerned with the disruption of the reasonable movement of people in the streets of Basseterre. What we have attempted to do through a number of committees, sometimes coming through the auspices of the Urban Development Unit, sometimes coming through Sustainable Development, sometimes coming through the Building Board, is to have ideas, have places, alternative places identified where the vendors can be relocated that would lead to a better managed process within Barstow and less challenges to traffic, to pedestrians and motorists in Barstow. And we intend very shortly to bring all three agencies, because each has been involved at different levels in terms of the ideas and proposals, and to see how those can be harmonized. The Building Board have done some very extensive work at that. We had the Urban Development Unit do some work on that. So I think what we need, there seem to have been some element of silos with respect to the operation, is to have a coordinated effort, bring a single proposal for the consideration of the government so that we could move on that. We would want to encourage all those who are vending on the streets to be aware and to be reminded that space is available within the public market, and that certainly will be one of the venues that we will insist upon. Equally, we are committed to do some renovations to the stalls, etc., to ensure that they are fit for purpose. It will therefore be useful for as many people as possible to go there to look, to see what is available, and to begin to speak with the Department of Agriculture with respect to that. We have identified at least 2 spots where we could also assist vendors in having a safe space from which to do their particular line of business. And we are going to work through these over the next couple of months to ensure that we have a policy that can withstand the test of time. We would want to encourage those who are buying, because if there are no buyers, the sellers would soon disappear, that they take their business inside of the market. The fees for using the public market are giveaway fees, negligible, and therefore there is no reason for persons not wanting to utilize a facility that is already there and that is in the heart of town. As I say, we acknowledge that there is some renovation that may need to be done, and we are prepared to take that under consideration. We will see the movement of vendors in a phased way. So you're not going to wake up one morning and see everybody disappear. We are giving people advanced notice so that they can exercise choices freely rather than to have options forced upon them. The construction with respect to the CBI, the initiative that I announced regarding the reduction in the stamp duty to 2.5% is intended, of course, to stimulate activity in that sector, largely in the real estate market. It is still too early to judge the response, but we will continue to monitor. I would say that that initiative had come because persons involved in the sector had been engaging government about this kind of support, and we have responded in a very positive way to assist them at a time of difficulty and challenge. With respect to construction activity in the public sector continues apace. There have been no stoppage. In fact, very early, we had ensured that as we open up the public sector programs were identified, our road program had continued, our program at Old Road, etc., the construction work at the multipurpose facility at Lodge Otlis, that is continuing. All these are continuing apace, and so construction is still very busy within the public sector. Within the private sector, that is something that we have to do a further assessment. What we do know is that interests now seem to have peaked again. We have had the recent announcement from the executive director, I think he is, at the TDC, that they are going to start a project which some years ago they had received land from the government to engage in a middle-income residential dwelling. We have also had, since that announcement, a number of other private actors come into the government to say that they are prepared to engage in residential construction for the middle-income earner and those above. And we encourage that, since the NHC has had a weighted concentration for those at the lower, middle, and lower end. We want as many persons as possible to be engaged. And where the government can assist in terms of special prizes for the lands and other input that would make the mortgage financing easy, we certainly will do so. We have sustained over the last 5 years the first-time homeowner mortgage financing program, where any citizen who is going to build a house for the first time, that person can get duty-free concession and building materials. For the year so far, over $17 million worth of materials have benefited from concessions, reduction of duty, etc., to facilitate the construction. We are hoping that those things will begin a build-out in a way that impacts significantly on the sector and in particular job creation. So that is where we are at with respect to that matter. I think there may have been a third question, did you? Yes? Could you repeat that one? I will say that that is still a work in progress, and we are getting significant support as we attempt to add technology in a very aggressive way to our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This app will allow us to be able to be more effective in terms of contact tracing. It will become particularly useful as the government now, in preparation for the build-out and larger inflows of people, we have considered and approved for the task force to begin to establish protocols for private residences, villas, etc., to be used for quarantine purposes. And the app will have the capability to do geofencing, so you can know when somebody moves beyond where they should be and appropriate corrective measures taken, among other things. So this is going to be very useful for us because there's so much bodies we can put to work in terms of monitoring and surveillance. We have also asked Mr. Brandy, as a member of the task force, to begin a training program so that we could have additional persons, not necessarily at the level of fully trained police officers, with the capability to monitor some of these sites that will now emerge. And we are saying that where persons are opting for quote-unquote private residences to be used, other than those, well, all in the end will be designated by the task force as fit for purpose, but where they are beyond those which the government now has access to, for example, OTI, that those persons will pay the cost of this special treatment. So if you have a luxury house, more power to you. You'll be comfortable staying there. We welcome you to that. But the requirements in terms of the cost of having that particular place monitored will be borne by the private party. So these are things that become necessary as we ready the country for greater build-out and a return to as close to normalcy as we possibly can. The old order will no longer and is no longer here. And so these are some of the flexibilities we now have to introduce in the system to make it easier for everyone. I think we would have exhausted. We will have Mr. Bard. What was that one? We'll hear from Bard. Oh, under him. Okay.
Mr. Prime Minister, there's been a lot of talk and crosstalk among certain countries in the international community concerning a vaccine or vaccines for the COVID-19. I'm wondering, is this a concern for the leaders of the Caribbean community? Is this something that health ministers in the Caribbean community are talking about and trying to anticipate what is likely to happen if a vaccine is found, and how is the Caribbean going to benefit from that?
Thank you much. We will take one last question if there is a request for that, and then we'll have a response to all the questions, and we will move on.
My final question, the people of Cairn have been having some concerns as it relates to water. And my question would be, how soon will they be able to get some relief as it relates to that?
Thank you. I heard Big Lie say it's much improved now. But Mr. Hamilton will answer. Sean, sorry. We'll answer on that. We'll have Minister Byron Nisbet to respond with respect to the question posed with respect to her portfolio and the new and interesting areas of entertainment, etc. And then we will have Sean answer with respect to the water concerns.
Thank you again, PM, and thank you for the question, Ms. Daniel. Yes, indeed, we have begun trying to set the framework for the new Ministry of Entrepreneurship, Entertainment, and Talent Development. Conversations were already had with some ministries that we think would have some overlap, that is with the Ministry of Culture. So discussions would have already been had with the Minister of Culture in where we see those overlaps and how we think we can structure the new ministry so that both would be able to work hand in hand. The same meetings were had with Minister Phipps as it relates to the Small Development Unit, and particularly on the entrepreneurship side. What I can say is that we have already begun setting out the framework, placing our mandate and aims, and then shortly you would be hearing of the town halls that we will be having, because one of the aims of the ministry as well, since it's a brand new ministry, is to be able to have all the persons that are involved and affected and touched to be able to have a say in terms of how they think the ministry should work, how it would benefit them, how it would help. And so we would have the framework and the mandate set, and then shortly you should be hearing about that. So it might come as a different name as we try to pull more persons in. So instead of just calling it a town hall, so if you hear something advertising for Creative Arena, that would be for the Ministry of Entrepreneurship, Entertainment, and Talent Development. So the work is ongoing, and shortly we would have more input from the necessary persons. I know I would have already spoken to the chairman of the new PACE, and himself and the CEO will also be meeting with me. So we will be able to talk more about how those two entities will be able to work together and how they can also help in ensuring that this ministry is able to meet the needs of these individuals, and how we can be able to develop the talent development in particular and entertainment. But beyond that, we're also looking at innovators as well. So I would like to encourage persons, even though it says Creative Arena, I am hoping that innovators would also step forward, because we're moving towards a digitized economy, and we need persons to start thinking more about innovation and how they can develop IT solutions. And so they too will form part of the build out of this ministry as well. I hope that answers your question, Ms. Daniel.
I think it's a good answer, if I may say so, and commend you. I'll invite the Deputy Prime Minister, the matter of the water.
Good afternoon to everyone. The Ministry of Public Infrastructure is very much aware of the concerns of the residents of Cairn relative to the supply of water. As a matter of fact, it is a priority for the ministry, and we are currently looking at a number of different alternatives to address the situation in Keyon. When I inherited the ministry, it is a concern that came before me. One of the things that we are doing at this point in time is to look at a well that we refer to as Shadwell number 2. Shadwell number 2, I have been advised, if it is connected to the cistern in Bearfords, it has the ability to feed water to Keyon. However, we have had concerns with Shadwell 2. Shadwell 2, when it was developed, had a number of different tests done on the quality of the water. The initial test showed that the quality of the water isn't such that it should be put into production for persons to consume. However, we are in the process of retesting. Recently, a test was done by the Bureau of Standards here in St. Kitts. Those results looked very good, and the director there actually said that the quality looks like that of bottled water, which we would use to drink. However, out of an abundance of caution, a decision has been taken to test the water at other labs outside of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. During the course of last week, for example, we sent a sample to a lab in Miami. We have been told that the turnaround time is approximately 10 business days. Therefore, we are awaiting the results from that particular lab in Miami. CARPHA, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, also has a lab in St. Lucia which does testing. Last week, Friday, I would have reached out to CARPHA relative to doing tests of the water coming from Shadwell 2. Surprisingly, we were able to get the RSS to assist us in transporting a sample of the very same water from Shadwell 2 to St. Lucia just yesterday. The RSS would have made special provisions to come into St. Kitts and take the water back to St. Lucia. I've been advised that the turnaround time for the results coming from CARPHA is about 5 business days. Hence, we are awaiting the tests from those 2 labs. Once we are satisfied with the results, then I think a decision can be taken to put Shadwell 2 into production, thereby bringing some temporary relief to the people of Keyon. If the results are not looking good, then it means that relative to Shadwell 2, we have to put a reverse osmosis system in place in order to purify the water coming from that particular well. And there's an alternative which has also been given to the ministry in terms of ensuring that the water is safe for consumption. Those, though, we would prefer not to have to go through, but if they become necessary, we will have to. The difficulty with the other 2 methods are that the expertise that we need in order to ensure that the water is safe for drinking would require persons coming in from overseas. We have gathered from persons that they don't wish to go into quarantine. That is a concern for us because it means then that it's going to take a longer period of time. One device that we are looking at in terms of the reverse osmosis, I think that is approximately $400 and something thousand US without freight being involved. So indeed it is costly, but the government is committed to bringing some solution to the people of Keyon. The second alternative that we are actually looking at is to have a well dug in Keyon to do exploration for water in Keyon. One company, BEAD, said that when they were here, and that is the company which would have developed Shadwell 2, that they identified the possibility of a well in Keyon. If that is indeed the case, it means that it should not take too long of a period if they are to come in and do the well. Again, the sticking point is that of quarantine. We have a particular policy relative to quarantine, and the government has no intention of bending on that policy. However, we are actively addressing the situation in Cayon. I think it was Monday morning or Friday morning, actually, I spoke to one of the persons for BEAD on island, Ralston Isaac. He indicated to me that once the government is willing to enter into a contract with BEAD to do the exploration in Cayon, he will say to his partners that they must be prepared to come in, do the quarantine, and start the exploration as soon as possible. I personally would not be comfortable for the government to enter a contract with someone, pay someone money, and then they're waiting until there is no quarantine in place for that particular company to come in to do the work. So that must be part of the negotiations. You must be willing, upon the signing of a contract, to do the quarantine and then to begin to do the exploration. Water, we have always been told, is life, and so we fully understand the cries coming from the people of Cayon, and as best as possible, as soon as possible, we want to solve that particular situation. We understand that there are also other communities which have similar concerns, and we intend to address those concerns also. I hope that would have answered your question.
Thanks. I just want to underscore that the government's response will be a comprehensive one, and we are looking at various methods to ensure a safe and reliable flow of water will come. The challenge has been not just in Cayon and Milliken and elsewhere, in the Bastia zone, and certainly in Lodge and Atlas, where one of the interventions was to have moved some water there over to Cayon. In the end, though, you had two communities that from time to time suffer from outages of water. And so we want to have a comprehensive response, and we want to have this one as soon as is reasonably possible to do so. And we give the commitment to the people. The Cayons, the problem, for example, at Cayon go way back for a lifetime. Indeed, when I was a student at Cayon High School, we had the problems with water supply being unreliable. So it had succeeded administration after administration and several generations. I see Margie's here from Cayon, and she would know that that go back a long, long time. I got it even before Jean's time. So it would mean a major legacy delivery when my government properly deals with this important necessity, having a reliable supply of water. So we are committed really to do so. On the question posed with respect to the vaccine and what benefit will that bring, clearly there is obvious benefit. I understand the crosstalk to be talk about who will have first mover rights with respect to it, and that is an important consideration. We know that the US have made it clear that it has to have preference where its companies are involved in the production of the vaccine. The way we look at it, the production of a reliable vaccine anywhere at any point in time would be a global public good, that it will bring benefits to all of us. Because so long as COVID-19 is anywhere, it is everywhere, in that it only takes one visitor from a particular jurisdiction with it to come into another jurisdiction, and then all of us are exposed. So we want the vaccine to be available as quickly as possible. And we do not mind the fact really that it may well be that the United States of America, London, where there is, well, the United Kingdom, where there is considerable aggressive research being done by Oxford and other entities to bring that vaccine, France, we do not mind if they become the first beneficiaries, because in fact they are our major source markets. And it means that if they can reduce their own vulnerability to the COVID-19, when their citizens come to us, there would be less of a challenge and a threat. So there is an indirect benefit. The creation of this vaccine, in my view, would be an important public good with benefits going beyond the particular jurisdiction in which it will be created. By reducing it among other populations, other jurisdictions, we certainly become less vulnerable to the extent we do not have community transmission. And so we are all in favor of that work and commend the effective or the soonest production of a suitable vaccine. I want on this point to say thank you to the representatives of the media who have come out today and all the persons who have come to participate, as it were, actively and some passively in this exercise of public accountability. We are happy to have had this opportunity to update on a wide range of issues of national interest. We do anticipate that the questions posed from time to time from the media are the concerns of other people, and we want to thank you for posing them so that the government could be held accountable and could provide the kind of information that would help people make the right decisions. So once again, hearty thank you. I want to thank all of the cabinet colleagues who have come out today for being part of it and for the opportunity they have had to respond directly to the question posed. Our Deputy Prime Minister, our Minister of Human Settlement, our Minister of Tourism, our Minister of Environment, our Minister of Health, our Minister of Industry, Commerce, Labour, our Minister of Education. I want to thank all of you and all the public officers who have come out today to be part of this press conference. Thank you, and we thank Valti for calling from his hospital bed also to put 2 questions to us. So again, thank you very much. Do enjoy your lunch, those who will take part in it in soon time. Thanks.
If you own or work with animals, please follow these tips to avoid getting the coronavirus.